Greetings one and all, and welcome to the Emporium of Elements. Now magic. It's a complicated thing to describe. Nearly the point of it is that you can't. Though almost every fantasy work has some form of magic that either allows the world to exist, creates goals and obstacles within the story, or provides characters with a set of problem-solving skills, actually defining magic is weird. Magic is, well, it's magic. Something supernatural that you kind of know what it means without being able to put it into an ultra-specific definition. But it is that lack of clarity which gives rise to the benefits of specific magic types, themselves much easier to impose definitions on. Necromancy has a connection with the dead, prophetic magic with reading the future, sorcery with arcane forces, etc. But arguably, the most popular of all magic subtypes is elemental. In this, the magic of the world is divided up into very specific types, usually natural, magical, or spiritual. This gives the user distinct abilities specific to their element. From as little as 4 to as many as 18, this categorized magic can ease chopping up your world into smaller pieces. But which is the most popular of elemental magic systems? Easy. It is the classical 4 elements: water, earth, fire, and air. But why are these 4 the most popular? Now, I've not personally found a definitive answer I'm satisfied with, but my own opinion, take that what you will, is it lies in our long-built symbolism with this quartet. After all, the patterns are easy to draw. If you're a writer of a fantasy world, why bother trying to draw new connections that might confuse your audience, when instead you can utilize a pre-existing system that no doubt they're already more familiar with. Even amongst other elemental magic systems, the 4 elements have become their own trope at this point, and they themselves offer this level of age and history to a world that few other elements seem to capture all that well. They've become their own trope at this point, removed from the concept of elemental magic. And for that, there is no shame in using them. They can easily elevate your story. The problem, for some stories, comes in originality with adaptation, or rather, lack of originality. Their usage in stories has become hollow in a few examples, and presents itself as little more than a poor rehash of what Avatar: The Last Airbender did. Now, this is nothing new. Many popular tropes have fallen to similar fates, often falling victim to their own success. Medias which utilize the 4 elements, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, however, are exceptional, and they deserve praise. It's just the influence this show has had on works that come after it, which have resulted in them feeling like mimics, who maybe didn't understand why Avatar: The Last Airbender system worked as well as it did. The very thing that has made the 4 elements easy to put into a story has also made them come victim to being considered unoriginal. Fire is hot-headed, water is stable, earth solves problems with their fists, and air is easy breezy till they flare into a storm. It is this that has made them a distraction in some fantasy works, or worse, they've been considered boring. This is less of a problem in magic systems that don't exclusively use the main 4, such as Baldur's Gate 3 or Pokemon, where they're only a small aspect of the magic. But for those that do rely on them almost exclusively, using only the basic mold for this trope can make them feel unnecessary or uninspired, the elements becoming a sore point in a story that might otherwise have been very interesting. But what was the point in that ramble? Besides unsubtly poking holes in Frozen 2, I will admit. I bring it up based on discourse I've seen of people online discussing the idea that the 4 elements are inherently unoriginal, which is of course nonsense. Tropes aren't cliches. The issue lies in the execution as opposed to the idea. They are not rules, they're rough guidelines that offer a vague suggestion as to how to approach an aspect of writing. One uses a trope to start work on an idea, but uses their own inspiration to shape it into something special and their own. And because we here at the Emporium of Elements are nice, here are 4 considerations for writing the 4 elements. Option 1. Altering the themes and personality traits of the elements. As mentioned, it is very common to associate, say, earth with simple-mindedness, or fire with hot-headedness. But water, earth, fire, and air have buckets of symbolism that exist around the world, bringing forth a huge possibility for characteristics one can use. Avatar: The Last Airbender has a full rainbow of personality traits it can attach to the citizens of the respective elements. In the case of the Fire Nation, many are arrogant or hot-headed, but those tend to be the background characters, or ones which are disposable. In the foreground, we have likes of Iroh, a highly unconventional firebender who does still embody the traits of fire, but not through hot-headedness. Rather, it's through connection with warmth and providing a light to others in their darkest times. If your character's personality traits do have to pull from the element they're associated with, consider what that actually means, and look to different sources to what aspect of the element you might utilize. Is the water a go-with-the-flow type, or perhaps they could be more creative and inventive? Maybe your airbender is a proactive one, like a sharp wind, instead of being the default easygoing member. Point number 2. Team dynamics. Now, elemental magic systems always lend themselves well to assembling squads. This often includes monster catching games like Pokemon and Temtem, where using different elements will optimize your team, providing you with the best strategies to conquer your foes. But there are also fantasy archetype teams, power trios, or 5-man bands, where each element makes up a different member of the group. And in this, the 4 elements tend to have pretty common roles that they fulfill. In the 5-man band example, it is the leader, lancer, and heart that usually ends up with fire, water, or air. This has left Earth nearly always occupying the role of the strong guy. But what of the smart guy? Well, actually very rarely he's occupied by any of the elements at all. Usually he's reserved for the non-magical member, or somebody who has the powers of ice or lightning or nature. Therefore, when writing your team dynamics, consider what roles you're putting your members into. Are they only being dictated by what element they have, or are they being dictated by their personality? Is your earthbender only the strong guy because that's their element, therefore that's where they go? Is the non-magic member only the smart guy because that's all you can think of to make up for the fact that they don't have any magic? Now, the element that is occupied by the 5th member of a 5-man band team that uses the 4 elements does vary from place to place, and we will talk about it another day. Usually, though, they tend to be non-magical, they occupy some 5th complementary element, or the element they occupy is in some way more than the other 4, some hierarchical element. But why not have hierarchy within your 4 elements? A common train of thought when designing elemental magic is that it has to be made equal. Everybody has to be on the same level playing field. But this is only really a thing in video games, and it is encouraged in video games for positive reasons. After all, no one would want to play a video game where your favorite element was for some reason far weaker than all the others. That would make your experience really poor and would make you really annoyed when everyone brought up how weak your favorite element was, wouldn't it? But outside the rigid order of video games, this doesn't apply to books, films, and TV shows. There's no requirement for your elements to be equal. After all, some stories where certain elements are the focus, it might be beneficial to have certain elements be inherently more powerful. After all, who doesn't love a good underdog story? In the Daevabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty, it goes into the exploration of what it means to have tiered elements. With Earth being the weakest, Air being the strongest, and Water and Fire being in the middle, it results in this strange dynamic. Air is nearly godly, but in that godliness comes a little bit of uselessness. Doing nothing, lack of proactive nature, this idea that they are more divine than the other 3. Earth, meanwhile, is blissfully unaware because humans are Earth, so they don't know that the world of the Jinn exists. Meanwhile, the fire elementals, who we definitely spend the most time with, we get to explore fully how their politics work, how they view the other elements, how they feel cheated almost by being restricted under the laws of the greater universe. In a similar sort of way, Avatar: The Last Airbender also has its elements set apart. They're not on equal ground. It's just not through power or through divinity, but technology. By the start of the series, the Fire Nation has undergone an industrial revolution, using steam technology and metallurgy. This has far pushed them ahead of the other 3, and has resulted in the 100 Years' War, owing to the Fire Nation's feeling of superiority over the others. So when writing your elements, consider, does your story benefit from having them on an equal level playing field, or might they be better being offset from one another? Maybe certain elements have a better angle of technology, they might have a more divine inspiration, or maybe through other angles. Culture, religion, politics, economy, all these things can be considered for how you write your elements to be a little bit more unfair, uneven. Hang on. If the modern template of the trope stems from Avatar: The Last Airbender, then why isn't this the commonality? Why are they all put on the same level? Actually pretty simple, Professor. Though Avatar: The Last Airbender is for sure the most common inspiration for writing the four elements, it isn't the only example people use. Dungeons & Dragons and Hercules also feature the four elements, and there's this common idea that these four are part of a whole set. They make up an equal quarter each. But that does bring me on to my last point. When writing the four elements, actually consider if you need all four, or are you just keeping them in because they make up the full set? Oh my, so you mean to tell me, for your last piece of encouragement, the last bit of advice you can offer our viewers is just don't write the four elements? Well done, Crane, you've truly outdone yourself with this one, I have to admit. Certainly not. A story that uses all four elements well and where the collective set feels necessary can be exquisite. A story doesn't even need to give them all equal amount of screen time. Looking at the Daevabad trilogy, fire takes up majority of the book. Water, earth, and air barely appear in it, but they still all feel part of the same story. I have, however, noticed some stories which include the full set of four for no real reason, and this leads the story to feeling bloated by their inclusion. Frozen 2 is a pretty good example of this. In the film, though the four elements do appear, only one is actually integral to the plot. Fire, air, and earth pretty much just exist to have examples of Elsa subduing the elements, having some connection with the spirits, and that's only really applying to Gale and Bruni. The Earth Giants just exist to destroy the dam at the end. There's not really much to them other than the merchandising for Bruni, and that's about it, really. They don't serve the wider themes or plot in any meaningful capacity. Now then, Nock, the water spirit, doesn't have these problems. You see, Nock is the biggest obstacle to Elsa in the film, and is also a visual representation of her growth by the end. Alongside just having awards for cool factor, because a water horse, Nock's element of water also seems to have been the most considered one of the film. Frequent mentions of water's connection with memory, and Elsa having to overcome water to get to Otaholland, not to mention the whole thing that made the spirits mad in the first place is a dam, and Elsa being an ice elemental means that Nock has a clear and obvious connection to her, unlike the other three spirits. It just means that Nock feels more integral, like he's actually part of the film, versus the other three feel distant and not really part of the equation. Up, save that fifth element for another day, we already discussed this. Right. Sorry, the point is that the film seems to have included the full set for the sake of having the full set, but only really considering the involvement of a singular element. This leaves the remaining three to bloat the film and confuse the story in an unsatisfying way. So when you're writing the elements, consider if you're actually using all the elements. Are some only being included because they're part of the set, or does your story receive some benefit from their inclusion? Hang on, we never mentioned Pixar's Elemental in all of this. Oh, would you look at the time? It's closing hour. Let's summarize our points. Writing the four elements can be an easy way to introduce your magic system to your readers, greeting them with something familiar and recognizable. However, they can also run into the trap of feeling samey and thrown in. Consider the following when you're writing your elements and see how it applies to your story. 1. What themes, emotions, and personalities do your elements evoke? Is it the common expectations for this element, or would your story benefit from a different approach? 2. If your elements are part of a team, what role do they serve? Are the dynamics of the elements standard, or will it be more interesting to explore this element as a different member of the group? 3. Consider if your elements need to be balanced. In a video game, this works really well, but in the context of books, films, and TV shows, your elements might be more interesting if they are at different power levels, be this by technology, or from culture, or from other aspects that you may want to consider. 4. Are you considering all your elements' involvement, or do you just want to have the full set? Would your story be better off if it only featured a handful of elements? Consider removing elements if they are not actually adding anything to your story, or reconsider their role in it if you want to keep all four around. Thank you so much for watching. Any engagement with this video, subscribing or liking is thoroughly appreciated. I'm currently working on the video for the fifth element, and also planning a video on earth, air, fire, or water, like an individual video each, tackling into what their themes are and how people use them. If you want to, guys, comment below on which is your favorite element, and I might prioritize that one. Say if most people want to see a fire elemental video next, then I might prioritize that. Or even just to let me know what your favorite element is. Mine is probably water. I just think it's generally the most interesting of the bunch. But other than that, my socials to Instagram is linked down below. And from us here at the Emporium, I thank you so much for your time, and I bid you all a farewell until I see you next.